By the end of this video, you will have created a picture frame which looks something like this. Our picture frame is 11.5 by 1 foot 1.5 by an inch and a quarter thick, and it's intended for an 8 by 10 piece of glass to sit in. Before we get started, I'd like to talk about a couple things that'll make your SketchUp life that much easier. First thing, I always like to work in the biggest screen that I possibly can. And if you on a desktop computer, if you hit the F11 key on the top of your keyboard, it'll change it from a screen with tabs to a full screen view. The second thing that you're going to need is a functional mouse. It's extremely hard to do anything with SketchUp on a trackpad. So make sure your mouse has a functional rolly wheel, which allows you to orbit back and forth and also zoom back in and out. The third thing that I like to have, if possible, is two screens. So that could be a Chromebook plugged in, or if you are lucky enough, like I am, to have two screens, you could have this YouTube video running on the left-hand side and be doing the SketchUp on the right-hand side. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Before we dive into it, something that I always encourage my students to do is actually learn what are called the quick keys. So the quick keys are just keys that you tap on your keyboard to activate various tools. I've made a list of those in a Google slideshow. And some of the most common ones that I use are P, Q, R, S, spacebar, C, E for eraser, M for move, and so on. If you want to pause for a second and write these down and put them next to you, it is going to make your life so much faster and so much easier. Let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to learn today. So by the end of this particular lesson, you will have learned how to set up a scene. You will have learned the difference between a component and a group. You will have learned how to use the dimensioning tool, and you will also have learned some basic woodwork joinery. Let's go ahead and dive into it. When you open up your SketchUp design, you will not have a picture frame. You will have a blank slate, and there's typically a lady or another sort of avatar that's featured in there. You can select that and delete that person, or you can leave them in place. The next thing that I'd like you to do is please make sure you click up here, and this should say Untitled. If you click on it, you are going to enter your file name, and you're going to click Save. Please don't assume that Trimble is automatically going to save for you. I always like to check occasionally that this is grayed out up top and it says saved. If your computer happens to crash or you happen to lose internet connectivity, it's just a good habit to get in to actually go ahead and save something. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about quick keys, and I'm going to try to pause every single time. I'm going to show you what the quick key is. So the quick key, for example, for the pointer button is the space bar. If you want a paint bucket, that would be the P, or it's a push pull is P button. If you want a paint bucket, that's the B button. And I sort of actually just do this intuitively. I've done SketchUp enough that I would say that I'm pretty fast at it. And I actually don't even look at my keyboard, and I can tap that key and activate the tools. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually I'm going to draw a rectangle, which is 11.5 by 1 foot 1.5. Additionally, I'm going to hit the F11 key on my keyboard to activate the full screen view. Once again, I like to work in the biggest screen that I can. Now, a really common mistake for somebody that's starting out with SketchUp is you cannot actually physically click down here to enter in dimensions. And I don't really know why that is, but I don't even pay attention anymore. So for a rectangle tool, rectangle starts with an R, so I'm going to tap the R key. Rectangle tool is also located over here about midway down. If you hover on top of each of these items, it'll tell you roughly what they mean. So rectangle is 11.5 by 1 foot 1.5 inches. So 11.5 is, I'm just going to type in 11.5 inches, comma, 1 foot is also known as 12 inches, plus 1.5 inches would be 13.5 inches. So there's two ways to type that. I'm just going to convert these all to inches because I find it easier. So I'm going to rotate my view by adjusting the rolly wheel, okay, and you can zoom in and out, and I'm going to try to get it somewhat of a overhead view, if you will. Tap the rectangle key, and if you look down here in the bottom right of my screen where it says dimensions, you can see how the dimensions are starting to increase or decrease. I'm going to let go of my mouse entirely, and I'm going to type in 11.5 shift inches. That inch symbol is right next to your enter key on your keyboard. Then I'm going to type a comma to differentiate the dimensions by 1 foot 1.5, which is also known as 13.5 inches. So we'll type in 13.5 shift inches and we'll hit enter. Now your rectangle, it could be oriented in a different direction. It really doesn't matter. Or if you're zoomed in or zoomed out, your rectangle might look just a little bit different than mine. That is totally fine. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to set up a scene. And I'll talk about why we're going to set up a scene here in a second. So let's go ahead and do that. On the right-hand side, you're going to see this little play button, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom. We're going to click on it. And it should pull you to something that looks like this. And currently it says there are no scenes in this model. So I'm going to click the plus button to add a scene. And you'll see that scene 1 has been created. I could relabel that as top view, side view, whatever else I wanted to do. And let's talk about why this is important. So a typical mistake that a student will make is they will end up sort of lost way out in space. Okay, they can't see where they are. Maybe they're upside down. They don't really know how to navigate yet. If you end up lost in space, what you can do, and if you did this right, you should be able to do this, is go back down to that scenes button. And I'm going to click on the scene that I just created. And you're going to see here in a second how it actually snaps me back to that exact same view. This is awesome for when you're printing actual blueprints. You can set up a really, really good view where you can see all your dimensions and always snap back into that particular view. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to use a tool called the offset tool, and we are going to draw this rectangle on the inside. Now, if I remember correctly, these are these are 2 inches. Okay, so we're going to use the offset tool. And the offset tool is actually located on the left-hand side under push-pull. And you are looking for this symbol right here. And if you notice how it says offset, and then there's an F in parentheses after it, that F means that that is the quick key. So if I tap F, so let's go F, that was bucket, sorry. It automatically pulls out that offset tool. So I'm going to click and I'm going to start dragging. I did not like that. So I'm going to Control Z or undo. I can also go up here and hit undo. So I'm going to hit F, click. I'm going to start dragging. I'm going to let go of my mouse. I'm going to type in 2 and I'm going to hit enter. And that is a 2-inch rectangle on the inside there. Now, the next tool that I want to find is actually my push-pull. So push-pull starts with a P. It's also located on the left-hand side here under push-pull. And I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. And I'm actually going to type in 1.25 or 1 1/4. So for the sake of this, I'm going to show you how to type in a fraction too. So I'm going to type in 1. I'm going to do a space and 1 1/4. And then I'm going to hold on the shift key and I'm going to activate my inch, which is the asterisk. And this little symbol right here is right on the left-hand side of your enter key. If I've done that, then what I can do on my keyboard is hit the enter key and it'll automatically snap it back to that particular dimension. This is a good segue into starting to add dimensions into your item. So if you want to measure something simply, you can just tap the T key to activate the tape measure. And I can measure from corner to corner and I can see, hey, yes, this is 1 1/4. Or if you want to add permanent dimensions, I can go to that tape measure tool. And underneath that tape measure tool, you're looking for this right here, which is the dimensioning tool, which is 2 red dots and a little 3. I'm going to click here, going to click here, and I'm going to click a 3rd time. For every single dimension that you put on your design, you need to click 3 times. Additionally, what I find really, really helpful with the dimensioning tool is that you are always going from a corner to a corner. So let's go ahead and zoom in. And if I were to try to dimension from this line to this line, SketchUp does not necessarily know where to attach to. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually tap the L key to activate the line tool. And let's try that again. L key to activate the line tool. And I will draw a temporary line there. And SketchUp needs a 90-degree angle or a corner, if you will, to snap to. Then what I could do is actually go back and I could put a dimension in here. If this line would be confusing in the actual build, I can hit the spacebar key to activate my pointer tool, or I could go over here and then I can hit the backspace or delete key and I could remove that particular line. So once again, with the dimensioning tool, corner to corner is the best. Worst case scenario, you might have to draw a temporary line. I'm going to go ahead and undo that by hitting the Control Z key a couple times. You can also hit undo up here. All right, for the next piece, what we're going to do is we're actually going to draw these miter joints right here. Okay, and I'm also going to get rid of this back right here as well. So I'm going to select my spacebar key, or I'm going to click over here. I'm going to select that area in between. I'm going to go ahead and hit the delete key, which is right above your up arrow on your keyboard. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the back. Next item that I need to do is I need to use the line tool or the pencil, which is located over here, and I need to connect my corners. So I'm going to tap the L key on my keyboard, and I'm going to go ahead and start drawing in corner to corner. Now, every single time that I do this, I'm actually tapping the L key again, and that's just habit. Sometimes what you're going to find is that this line tool likes to stick to the other line, and if you just tap the L key, it basically tells SketchUp, hey, make a new line, make a new line, make a new line. All right, now we are getting close to finished with our picture frame. The next thing that you need to understand is what a group versus a component is. Now, typically on most design work, whatever you do, once you start building it, or maybe you look at it a day or two later, you realize that, hey, I maybe made a mistake, or maybe my dimensions changed a little bit and you need to edit it. If you know how to group or use a component successfully, this saves you so much time later on. So let's go ahead and dive into that. The first thing that I want to do is I'm actually going to draw a bounding box around my entire picture frame, and I'm going to turn it blue. Okay, that's one way. So once again, pointer tool, draw a bounding box, draw all the way around. The second way to do it is with your mouse pad, or with your computer mouse rather, you are going to click 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and if you click 3 times rapidly, it's going to turn it blue. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to right click on it, and at this point I can make it into a component or I can make it into a group. So that's how you get started with the make a component or make a group thing. What I'm actually going to do is, if you are familiar with Microsoft Word and the Control-C versus Control-V, copy-paste, I'm going to teach you a new one of those. And this is kind of confusing, so pay attention closely. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select my entire object, turn it blue. I'm going to tap the M key, which is the move key, to activate the move tool. Then I'm going to tap the control key, which is in the bottom left corner. So M control, and I'm going to click on a corner and I'm going to drag out a brand new design. So M key, control key. Let's do that again. So once again, I'm going to select my entire object until it turns blue. I'm going to tap the M key, control key, and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag out. Now, you notice how this, when I'm dragging it, it's on the green axis. If you use your left, right, or if you use your arrows, you can actually force your drag to go in a particular direction. Now, for this to happen, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need a total of 3 different picture frames. So you'll need to have copy pasted these 3 different times. What I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to go through and I am going to delete portions of these and turn them into components. Now that we have 3 picture frames which are identical, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to activate my pointer tool by hitting the space bar, or it's called the select tool, I guess. I call it a pointer. And what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to draw a small rectangle around the left-hand side of one of my picture frames. And on my keyboard, I'm going to hit the delete key, which is right above your up arrow, and I'm going to delete a portion of that. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to do the same thing on this side, and I'm going to delete a portion of this one. You'll see that my shape all of a sudden turned for something that is 3-dimensional into a sort of 3-sided object. What I need to do is I need to tell SketchUp is that, hey, this is actually a solid object. To do that, I'm going to activate my line tool by tapping the L key, or I can go over here to the pencil, and I'm going to connect corner to corner. I'm going to use my rolly to rotate to the left on my mouse, corner to corner, and we now have this piece right here, which is solid. And this piece right here, I'm actually going to go ahead and delete. So I can triple click on it, 1, 2, 3, hit the delete key, and I'm going to get rid of that. The next piece that I need to actually turn into a solid object is this right here. So once again, I'm going to use my select tool or my pointer tool. I'm going to draw a box around it, delete, draw a box around it, delete, and I'm going to turn one of these back into a solid object. So I'm going to use my line tool, connect the dots, rotate my view using my rolly wheel, Use my line tool again, connect the dots. All right. Next tool that we're going to use is actually the paint bucket. So I'm going to hit the B button for paint bucket. It's also located over here. And what I want you to do is actually take the right hand of your picture frame. Let's turn that pink. And you notice how I just did one of them. So I'm going to actually triple click on it. Do it again. Turn that pink. Minimize this. I'm going to scooch over a little bit. Once again, I'm going to activate the bucket tool, paint bucket with the B key. And the top portion, let's turn that an orangish color. So I'm going to click here. And I can go ahead and I could select all of the faces. The other way to do it is if you triple click 1, 2, 3, then you use your paint bucket. It'll actually turn the entirety of that top piece orange or whatever color that you want it to be. So we have a pinkish piece or salmon colored piece, and we have an orange piece. The next thing I want to do is actually turn these into components. To do that, I'm going to triple click on it, 1, 2, 3, right click, and I'm going to go to make component. So with a component, what you're doing is you're basically making an item that can be copied and cloned really easy. So I'm going to call this top piece. Okay. So do the same thing here. I'm going to triple click on it, 1, 2, 3, right click, and I'm going to hit make component. And let's call this side piece. All right. So if you'll notice the difference here, if I click on this, how it just selects one line versus if I click on this, and this is a solid blue object, that means that I've actually successfully created a component or a group. The only way to tell, to my knowledge, is if you right click on it and you hit edit component, that tells you that it's a component versus a group. All right, let's go ahead and start copy pasting, and we're going to rotate these back into what something looks like a finished picture frame. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to tap the M key and to activate the move tool, and I'm going to go from a corner and I'm going to drag it over until it snaps right here. We currently have half of the picture frame created, but if you think about it, this piece is exactly the same as this piece right here, and this top piece is exactly the same as this piece right here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a copy paste. So I'm going to tap the M key, and I'm going to tap the control key, and I want to click and drag an object over. Now, if you notice that there's these little plus symbols on top, that's your rotation. If you hover on top of one of those, this will appear, and we are currently rotating on the blue axis. So I'm going to click once, and I'm going to start rotating. On the bottom of my screen, what you should see is some dimensions. Otherwise, you could actually rotate it to 180 or whatever else you think it is. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate it to there. Let's try doing it again. There we go. Yeah, you should have seen the dimensions right here. Now I'm going to tap the M key again, and I'm going to drag this over and snap it into place. So we'll do the same thing on the top. Once again, I'm going to select it. I'm going to tap the M key, control key. I'm going to click and drag it down. If you're struggling to drag it in the right direction, if you start tapping the arrows on your keyboard, you'll see that it actually forces you in a certain direction. So I'm going to get it close, and then I'm going to hover on top of it. I'm going to click, and I'm going to rotate. And if you look at my angle down below, I need to rotate it at -90. So if you're struggling to get to that point, what you can do is actually type in -90, enter, and it'll automatically snap it to whatever that rotational angle is. Next thing I'm going to do is tap the M key again, and I'm going to move this up to here, and I'm going to snap it into place. Now, why is this important to have a component versus a group and not just to draw a simple shape? So the cool thing about a component is if I go ahead and I select my pointer tool, and let's say I double click on this, or triple click, sorry, and I want to edit this piece. The cool thing is if I pull this up, it edits everything else that is the same as it. So this is the top piece, this is the top piece component. Let's say I had 100 of these. If I edit one, it's going to edit the other 99. So I don't actually want to do that, so I'm going to Control Z. With a group, if you were just to group those, basically that just locks that shape, and it doesn't allow you to, anything that you draw on top of that shape isn't editable. With a component, if you edit one, you're going to edit them all. For the final portion on our simple picture frame, what we're going to do is we're actually going to draw what's called a rabbet joint all the way around the back edge. And this is where our glass and our backer board is actually going to insert. So if you notice here how these pieces of wood, which we're going to cut out, actually have a little bit of an indentation in them. What we're going to do is we're actually going to jump back over to the design we've been working on, and I'll show you how to draw those. So I'm going to use the hand tool, H tool, to pan to the left here. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate my view so I'm looking at the underside. Now you could do this from the top side and then just flip the entire thing over. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the space bar to activate my pointer tool. And if I click on this, this is currently blue, which means that the thing is locked. So I don't know if this is a component or a group. To ascertain that, what I can do is right click on it and I can hit edit component. The other way to do it is if you click on it once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession, it'll actually open it up. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to edit this using the tape measure tool. So I'm going to hit the T button and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag this direction on the green axis by 0.5 of an inch, and I'm going to hit enter. Oop, that did not work. Let's try that again. We're going to drag up and like open my mouse. I'm going to type in 0.5. We'll hit enter. Yes, that looks better. Now, using this dotted line as a reference, I'm actually going to use my line tool and I'm going to draw a line in between those 2 points. If you did it right, this should be a solid color and this should be a dotted color. If you didn't draw your line all the way across, it will not allow you to push or pull that. Next tool I'm going to grab is the push-pull tool, and I'm going to go ahead and push that down by 0.5 of an inch. Hit the F11 key a couple. So this is a 1/2 inch deep by a 1/2 inch in. Okay, and the cool thing, now that these are components, is I edited this side and I also edited this side at the same time. It's going to save you so much work if you use a component versus a group in your actual SketchUp design. All right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump out of this. So I'll use my selection tool and I can right click on it or I can just simply double click on it and you'll see how it actually turned back into non-grayed out colors. So let's go ahead and open this one up. I'm going to click on it, right click, and I'm going to edit component. The other way I could do is I could click on it 3 times. I need to connect this corner to this corner. To do that, I'm going to use the line tool and I'm going to draw across. Then I'm going to use my push-pull tool, which is the P button. Line tool is L, push-pull is P, and I'm going to drag it down. And I don't know if you caught what I did there, so let's do a Control Z. So if I click and hold down my mouse, and if you see this dotted line that appears, if I hold it along that edge, it's saying, hey, SketchUp, push-pull it to that point, snap to that point, and I'm going to let go. Okay, we are doing well. I'm going to hit save just to make sure. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to go ahead and rotate my view back to my top view. And the final thing that I need to do is go ahead and add some dimension to these lines in. These lines, if you want to get rid of them, you can simply draw a box around them and delete them. The other way, the better way to do it is if you go over the eyeglasses here and you go to delete all guides, it'll remove those dotted lines for you. So if I'm going to build this, I need basically all of the dimensions. To do that, I'm going to use the dimensioning tool, which is located on the tape measure. Click on the 3. I'm going to click once, I'm going to click twice, and a third time. Once again, corner to corner. And if I click right here, it's going to assume that I want to move this thing. So I'm going to go to the opposite corner, click once, I'm going to click twice, and a third time. And I already have my thickness here, which is 1.25 inches. The other dimension that I'm going to need is the depth of this. So when we cut that on the table saw, we'll know, oh, that's 3/4. And if you wanted to put a dimension down here, you could. If you hit the K button, which is a cut through, you can sometimes go from corner to corner and you could drag it out to somewhere that you can see it. At this point, our design is ready for fabrication. We will actually do something called a biscuit joint right here in the shop. But that is really doesn't impact our overall design. If this was a funky angle, we could actually figure out what this angle was, but I know that this is actually a 45-degree angle. So when we cut it on the miter saw, we can just go ahead and set our miter saw up at exactly 45. I hope that helps. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to throw those. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you are someone other than a student.